Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
Hi, it's Mike Stone, and welcome back to the Wild Health Podcast. Today, we're really excited to host Jodi Wellman. Jodi is a former corporate executive turned executive coach. She has a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, where she's an instructor in the master's program and a trainer in the world-renowned Penn Resilience program. She's a professional certified coach with the ICF and a certified professional coactive coach from CTI. Jodi has written an amazing book called You Only Die Once, and we'll get into that today, as well as her own business, 4,000 Mondays. She lives between Palm Springs and Chicago with her husband and cat, Andy. You can watch her inspirational TEDx talk on how death can bring you back to life, and we'll go ahead and put that link in the show notes. So moving on to our conversation with Jodi Wellman.
Ready.
All right, so super excited to sit down for this conversation with you, Jodi. Just gave your overly glowing bio to everyone, so we can spare you having to sit to listen to it. Talk to me about how your day's going and what you're up to today.
Oh, great. I'm so excited to be here, Mike. So thanks for having me here on this conversation. And I'm going to be super honest. You cut out for half of it, so I didn't hear quite the end. Was there a question there? Sorry.
The question at the end there. We'll see how we do with our connectivity today. The question at the end was, "Tell me about your day. How's your day going?"
Oh, today is spectacular because it's a Monday, and I know nobody wants Mondays. I think you like Mondays, maybe,
I do like Mondays.
My company is called 4,000 Mondays. Because that's roughly all we get to deal with in this lifetime. And yeah, Mondays are just like great, fresh freaking starts to just do this life justice. But you like Mondays, right?
I do like Mondays. I think it's a little bit of a, it may come off as a little bit corny, but Mondays always feel like a barrage of logistics and tasks for the first kind of 2 hours. And then there's this special moment where like any fires that have brewed have been kind of at least temporarily extinguished. And then there's this pause where it feels like, all right, what's this week going to be about? And it's this sort of the potential kind of emerges from the chaos. And yeah, I mean, I can't say I look forward to the first hour of Monday, but there's always that moment. It's sort of like late morning or on a bad Monday or early afternoon where it's like, okay, now there's this promise and this potential, and it feels like a deep silence and just presence.
Oh, I love that so much. Reminds me of that expression. I saw it on someone's cubicle once. I went to a client and I saw she had this fantastic sign. It was like intoxicated with possibility. Like of the possibility of what could come, the potential, just this. And I love that notion for life, right? Like, look at all the cool things that are in store for us if we identify what we actually think might be cool. And actually, we take one tiny little step at a time towards getting there. But I like intoxicated by potential or possibility.
That seems like something we should, you should have up as a reminder on the wall, either in the gym or the kitchen or something. Intoxicated by possibility. I love that.
Exactly. I mean, certainly at the bar, being intoxicated, that to me feels appropriate. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for the Monday enthusiasm. I'm stoked to be here too. Let's get into it a little bit. So for people who haven't watched your TED Talk, which we'll link to in the show notes, and haven't been to 4,000 Mondays, talk to me about how you got started in what I'll paraphrase as being acutely aware of the limited time we have on this earth in human form, and then how to take that and translate it into living the deepest, most satisfying, joyful lives possible.
What a cool summary, by the way. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, this counterintuitive notion of using our mortality as a motivator. What? To live like we mean it? And, I hope most of your listeners have not officially turned off by now, because wait, we're not, death is a means to an end here. I think the title, if I recall it correctly now, of my TEDx was how death can bring us back to life. In an unexpected way, right? That, well, wait a minute. The fact that we can focus on for just a hot sec how finite all this is, that helps us to actually treasure it a little more and stop taking it for granted, which is our instinct. And so, I got into this early on, relatively speaking, always fascinated by this weird juxtaposition of life, right? Like we're all working hard to be happy in some way, shape, or form. Feel good, be healthy, be fit, all the things that help us to just, maximize life. And then it's just going to come to a sudden end, and we don't know when that is. That's just the most bizarre thing ever. So now that, of course, we've all sparked an existential crisis here, that idea has been interesting to me. And then I studied the idea of memento mori, which is the Latin phrase that means "remember, we must die," for my thesis, doing my Master's of Applied Positive Psychology at University of Pennsylvania. And for me, that was that opened up everything for me, because it was this notion of wait a minute, it's more than just something which is a really cool philosophy, carpe diem. We've all seen Dead Poet Society. There's more than just the idea about, life's short, make the most of it. It's that there's cool stuff rooted in science and psychology that we can use to our advantage. And then I was like, well, now there's no turning back. I'm doing this for the rest of my life, I think.
Amazing. Yeah, it's there's, and I think I don't recall if you referenced this specifically in the TEDx talk, but we had a little bit of a chance to connect on this, and I promise no deep dives into ancient traditions, but this is not only in Latin, but in Theravada Buddhism and Dzogchen. There's this, there are Tibetan Buddhism. There's an emphasis on meditating on and contemplating our death, and that can be as sort of gory and intense as visualizing the decaying of our physical form, all the way through imagining sort of the open light and the forms and deities that might appear after death, and then how to navigate a thoughtful and rewarding next life, or how to transition into pure awareness and consciousness. All of this dates back across the world in independent traditions, and it doesn't have to be morbid, but certainly in the current modern day United States society, this is not a topic. I can't imagine there were that many people in your master's program in positive psychology who chose a death-based topic as the way they were going to write their thesis.
Right.
So, I guess there's a question boiling in here for me, which is, has that been easy for you? Have you faced challenges in sort of within your field of taking a mortality forward approach to positive psychology?
It is a good question. And I'll be honest with you. When I applied for the program, you have to do, you do an essay as part of your process. And I was like, do I be honest and say I want to talk about mortality? Or do I do the usual corporate thing, which I was doing at the time, which was how to be a better leader? And I chickened out. I was like, I'm going to talk about being a leader because I do not want them to not accept me because they think that I'm too weird talking about death. The truth of it all, though, was that there's actually sort of current in positive psychology. Some people call it positive psychology 2.0. Some people call it the dark side. Doesn't matter. But there's this acceptance in the scientific study of what makes life worth living, of well-being, where it's bad stuff happens, including death, and that meaning is made from struggle and grief and suffering, et cetera. And acceptance that it is about being resilient. Resilience is one of the biggest topics in positive psychology of all. And baked into that is already a notion that you have to be resilient because of the trash that's happening to you in your life. And so it's already kind of in there, and they were very supportive of it. And I fortunately was not made to feel like a black sheep in the program. And yeah, the fact that I'm still affiliated there is a good sign. So yeah, it's this idea, like you hinted at the old, more than traditions, but this idea that I boil down anything about Buddhism or some of the Eastern cultures that have just been so much more advanced on accepting death. It's acceptance, right? And in Western culture, again, more traditionally speaking, broad paintbrush to paint with here. It's that we're not good at the acceptance and the equanimity about it's coming, and we know it rationally. We're not idiots. But we just do the fancy footwork of denial so darned well. We don't want to talk about it, think about it. No one wants to do their will. The most we can muster is like putting together a bucket list, which to me is also a little bit risky, because I think that, to be honest, they're just these like repository of dreams that we get to keep deferring, which scares me, because I think that's what we do is defer, postpone existence. But yeah, we're way more comfortable denying the idea rather than accepting it. I think you're super right.
Yeah, it's I love that framing of the bucket list, and I think I'd be curious, sort of how when we work with clients at Wild Health, we really do take an integrative look at everything, and not just sort of, your physical health and your mental health and your spiritual health and, across different organ systems in your family life and your social support and connections, but purpose and sort of what's really driving you, and what, to move away from this I'll be happy when mentality of, I'll get a promotion and then that's going to fix everything, or I'm going to, get a raise and then I'm going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And this whole sort of future gazing that's so common. And part of when I first meet with someone is I really want to dive into almost a life biopsy of where are you right now with regards to not just your physical health, but your mental health, your emotional health. Where are you on the purpose and sort of path of living most fully? And I'm curious, where do you start with someone to see sort of how alive are you?
Yeah. I like your biopsy idea. All these little points are resonating. This language. I call it a pre-mortem. And in the book, it's one of the first chapters where it's kind of doing what you're doing. It's like a deep dive. It's this full discovery about, hello, you. And so I like people doing it for themselves now through the book, because this is about you getting in touch with what makes you feel alive, where have you flatlined, because, in all the domains of life. Where are you? What do you want? Like, I think part of our issue is that many of us have just gotten so busy and our eyes are glazed over and we're in autopilot just so we can function, that we've lost the plot on like what actually does make me happy. Like when I do workshops, I do this and I ask people, write out a list of 30 things that make you happy. They need to be accessible things. You can't just say like, oh, flying and going on the Antarctic cruise. Like, no, it needs to be something kind of doable in your life. Most people are a little bit stumped. And we need help. Our memories need jogging about what we even like to do. As adults, most of us have gotten kind of off kilter with our hobbies or our recreation and leisure. It's like we're living for vacation. That feeling of like, I'm working, and I'm in this kind of like highly functioning zombie routine. And then I'm going to come alive on either the weekend or when we're on vacation. And I think of like, oh, but what about the life that's getting kind of like deflated of life in between then? So it's getting to know yourself up first. And that can happen through reading like in the book or in a workshop or some way where you're able to really know yourself and say, what do I love? What have I fathomed for the future? Like, what is the possibility or what is the potential that we've been alluding to earlier? Like, what could be cool for me down the road? And it doesn't need to be flashy. This is where I think, because I use the words astonishingly alive in the book and in my work. And I think I set myself up for a little bit of judgment, because it's like, well, it doesn't need to be snazzy and look good on Instagram. And I'm like, no, oh my goodness. If, for many people, it's super relative. Like your idea of an astonishingly alive life might be just something that's so sweet and simple Whereas someone else's might be flashy and big and doing all the things every night and out for all the tasting menus and whatever. And that's cool. But like, we're all different, but just, do you know what lights you up? And are you giving yourself a fighting chance to do that? Maybe enough. Maybe you are awesome. And, or do you need to do a little bit more? That's the wake up call I think we need.
Yeah. I love that. And it's that living for vacation is the whole future gazing of, once this happens, then things will really start to feel like I'm alive and things are wonderful. And guess what? No one ever lives the future they imagined. Right. So you're sitting there going, well, yeah, once I go on this cruise, then X, Y, and Z, and it's never going to be like that. It might be better than what you were hoping. It might be worse. It might be the same. I mean, it's just never going to be what you think it's going to be. And when you're looking forward to something, I always feel like you're missing out on what's here right now. So and it's hard. It's like, some of this is how do you take some of this, carpe diem, memento mori, be here now kind of, insight and awareness. And I think the real challenge for so many of us is, how do you then translate that and snap yourself out of your inbox, your pipe that burst that flooded a couple of bathrooms in your house, your I don't know, your in-laws, like whatever it is. There's the sort of broad workshop based life assessment, pre-mortem life biopsy, and then there's like Tuesday at 2 p.m. when the school calls in your kid has a fever.
Yes.
Right. And I'd love to hear how you kind of approach the sort of
but I fathomed for myself that I was
side.
going to have this fabulous afternoon, and then now life went and wrecked it. And now what, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of the lessons and you'd see this too in your line of work. I love learning from the research about people who've had any kind of brush with death, like any kind of near-death experience. So it could be the light touch stuff. It could be heavy duty. Oh my gosh, I saw the light and I came back, whatever it is. The research is so confirming that people who've had a far more shaking of the, shoulders, wake up call, they now know what their priorities are. They have learned to kind of abandon to a much greater extent the sweating of the small stuff. They now know, like, for example, some of us could just be like, I don't have to care about my inbox if I didn't respond on time. Sometimes if you have to pick up a sick kid, you can't just not go pick up the sick kid, unfortunately. I guess you could choose that option, but maybe it wouldn't be a bright one. But then you could
frowned upon.
In your experience, okay, fine. You could, at that point though, is about like having that equanimity we talked about, like, hey, like this is, I'm rolling with it and I'm going to recalibrate my plans to do that neat thing where I was going to go sketch in the park. That's cool. You know what? The lighting will be better on Friday morning anyways, whatnot. It's about having that sense, I think, like rolling with it. And that is often not something that we are prepared to do. Let alone even just have that idea and being committed and engaged to giving it a try.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of an author who I really like, Jeff Foster, wrote a book called The Deepest Acceptance. And part of his overall vision is that the moment that's unfolding right now has already been allowed. It's happening because it's happening. And it's this idea of greeting everything with a yes, which again references ancient tradition and is this whole sort of like, life is suffering. And people, there's a lot of misconception around what that really means. And I'm not claiming to say that I have like a deep truth around it, but I think to me, that means that, suffering is resisting what's actually happening right now all the time, right? And it's just a reaction to it that creates the suffering. So can you greet the phone call with yes? My kid has a fever and needs to be picked up from school. And just for the record, my kids are way older. They better get themselves home from school if they have a fever. But being able to go, okay, like I can be here for my child who needs help right now. And what a blessing. to be able to do that, as opposed to, man, I was really looking forward to binge watching the rest of X, Y, and Z, and now I need to get up and go do
totally.
X.
Yes. The degree to which we get attached to these outcomes or ideas. You mentioned this idea about like looking forward to things. And I like the point you made, because actually one of the things that I recommend, but I want to put now an asterisk on it, is this idea about anticipation. So not to be confused with that like destination addiction, like my happiness is contingent on when we move over here, or when I get the big job, or when I lose the weight or whatever. But even just having literal things on your calendar to look forward to. And my recommendation is usually within 1 week, 1 month, and 1 year. Is there something on there that just makes you feel a little bit like it's the low-hanging fruit in a way of positive psychology? But I think to take this to the next level, which is what you're helping to do, is about, it's not that trip you're looking forward to in a year from now is going to be the thing that's going to deliver everything for you. It's sort of simply acknowledging that, good for me, I helped plan this thing that is going to deliver in some way on my well-being. And like the idea of savoring is across like 3 temporal forms, right? So there is looking ahead into the future,
Sure.
Pre-anticipation, pre-savoring. I'm so excited, when even a little thing, like usually for me, the thing I'm looking forward to within a week is a meal that we're going to order or go and have. It's always comes back to food. And like, I'm so excited, to go and to have that, go to that restaurant where I know I like to get that one mushroom dish or whatever it is. That's pre-savoring. And that's, to be honest, like these are the tiny little slices of joy that we can eke out in an otherwise bazonkers day. Great. But then so that's in advance. There's savoring in the moment, which you're referring to. It's like just being in this moment and being like, I get to pick up my kid. Like I have a kid who loves me and needs me. Little frickin' bugger for having a fever, but we'll work with this. And being in that moment of savoring and going like, I'm here on this park bench, like feeling the breeze, and smelling the wood of the bench and being there. And then there's the savoring the past. And that, of course, can be an opportunity to jolt your well-being too. Like there's one woman I know, busy, aren't we all? And she was trying to find a better way to enjoy her 4 minutes of lunch, she called it, because, she was like scarfing back her food and like not really taking lunch. And it was like, okay, well, for some reason, she didn't want to read, even though she loved to read. A lot of people, their new MO is like, I'm going to read a chapter at lunch while I have a sandwich and just feel like I've done a nice little thing for myself. Her thing, whatever floats your boat, she would pick up her phone and go back like 2 years from go and look at the photos. And unless all your photos are what you said, are all of the pipe damage from when the pipes burst, or all of disaster and catastrophe, which that's like a totally different conversation. Most of us have photos that were like, oh, look at my cat in that pose, or, oh, that was a neat trip. And like that savoring is like, that's a moment that can shift you into a positive emotional state, which is one of the components of well-being. And it's cheap and it's cheerful and it's easy. And it took you 4 minutes and then you got to have your soup and now you're back to your day in a better mood than you were if you just answered 7 more emails.
Yeah. I mean, it's what my friend and recent guest on the podcast, Finney and Kelly, would call a circuit breaker. It's these moments where, and he really focuses on doing this largely through breath work, which is, incredibly powerful for this. But, the Googles and the Apple's algorithms have figured out that when you get it, they send you a notification that says this day 2 years ago. And it's some of your photos, or 4 years ago or whatever it is. And some of your photos sort of automatically, they collate a bunch of photos for you from a few years ago and send it to you. And the reason they do that is because people click on it, because it brings you a moment of breaking the circuit from sort of what am I in the midst of right now to, oh, wow, yeah, that was a great trip to blah, 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 or can't believe that I wore that back then, or whatever it is.
All of it. Yes. Yeah. Chances even just for the importance of novelty and variety. Like even in a simple routine that we have where we're going through our days, which I'm always pretty darn suspicious of, just for the record, it's like the thing that makes time feel like it flies by and the thing that glazes and dulls the edges of our lives are the habits and routines that we just kind of mind-numbingly get ourselves into. And again, when I talk about it and how we need variety and novelty, because they're really important components of well-being and psychology, newness. So a lot of people will think that it means that they have to really now throw a total wrench in their plans. And that feels anxiety inducing, especially for people who love structure and plans. I'm not a total animal. Like, you do not need to wreck all the routines that make you feel like life is just barely hanging on. And if I mess this one thing up, no, it's like, what about even the route to work if you're going into a workplace, right? Like, take it just a different route home and go and drive by the old neighborhood. Oh, wow, I didn't know that coffee shop opened up. Don't underestimate that. The dinner that you're going to cook, where it's like, when was the last time you cooked with garam masala as the spice? I don't know. Or what about even just shaking it up and saying, like, every Saturday we do this routine every morning, but what if we just went to that diner Saturday morning and did that and then did the other things, and just little tiny back to circuit breakers, but like pattern breaks that, again, just enough of them, not enough to like run your life off the road, especially if you like your, trains to run on time, enough though just to experience some sort of the exuberance of newness. It's hilarious to me how much we underestimate the impact of that. But sometimes it's just that little subtle little shift, a different perspective, that we know the things that are going on neurologically that just help you to get a new idea, to solve a problem, or even just the feeling of vitality that exists about, wow, this is kind of cool. We need more of that. And that is a little subtle little twist that we can build. And it's easy to do and it doesn't take money, right?
I am absolutely in love with all of this. To me, I'm stealing this idea from you, and I'm going to just call it your job today is to F it up. Right.
Thank you. Shake shit up is what I put on the snow globe where I drew the skull, because you got to shake up the snow globe of your life, and it is shake shit up. It's not stealing. Yeah. It's using it for good use.
Yeah. It's, and I love that it's just like, that to me is something I always really cherish is, if you're really, if you're into this sort of conscious living and you've tapped into that, whether it's been through a near-death experience or it's been through meditation or breath work or psychedelics or talk therapy or whatever, exercise, like whatever has kind of turned you on to that, or you're just naturally, spontaneously connected in that way. It's still about integrating it into your day-to-day life. That's still always the challenge, is this relative world of emails and tasks and et ceteras. And I love just take a different way home. It's so accessible for people. You don't have to learn breath work or meditation. You can literally like go left instead of right. And like, what's the worst thing? You effed it up. You got caught in some traffic, or you saw a cool part of your city that you never knew was there. Or, I love it. It's so accessible and so achievable for folks. That's, here's my assignment. If anybody's listening, go do this today. Go take a different way home.
Oh, I love that. And there's something else that's been coming up, which to me is like, it's the same idea, just with a little bit of a twist. It's like, do you ever go somewhere where you're curious about something but now you're already driving and you're like, well, I can't turn back. I'm like, are you sure? You can't. Yeah. So I'm a very planning type. I like to I know what time I'm going to get there. I know the route or whatever. And my husband and I were just in wine country this weekend. And we were like, it's one of those moments where when you are on the bike or you are on the car and you're kind of like, you're driving by and you're like, oh, what was down there? There's a notion about like, turn the car around. Like, go ahead, get off. Like, even if you're curious about that farmhouse or whatever it is, or what's in that store, it's like succumb to the curiosity. And it could be stupid. It could be pointless. You could go down the street and be like, oh, that's stupid. But yeah, but you gave it like you snooped around and gave it a look. I mean, obviously not on private property, but you gave it enough of a go. Like having that kind of turn the car around attitude. I want more of that. And that to me is like, that's part of the unlived life of what else could I find? It could be really cool, or I'm just could be really glad that I gave it a go, even if it was nothing.
I love that. And it's something we can all manage to do. It's not, it is to take us back to sort of, what's achievable. It's not a cruise, it's not a vacation, and it's not happening weeks from now. It's something that's right there for you that you can do every single day. And it's probably about it sort of verges onto like complexity / chaos theory of like need to have enough randomness in the system, but you can't have too much randomness and you can't have too little. Right. So it's sort of where's your own personal complexity theory randomness threshold. And I think you play around with it until you find that sweet spot where it feels like, yes, this is the amount of random I like in my life, because it probably will change from person to person.
It's such a good point. And even just our tolerance levels during different phases, right? Like, oh, it's a crazy period of work right now. Like, I just want to not, we've all been through that. Right? Like, don't make me make any decisions. I just want to reorder the same pizza. Don't make me think, or don't make me do anything. I just want to veg out. Totally cool. Accept that. Be good with it. And I think so much of our lives are like knowing when to assess it sooner than later. So because that to me is when the borders get fuzzy, when all of a sudden we find ourselves in a bit of a slump, when you're like, now that I think about it, it's been since the spring when we're like, oh, those are like 18 of your Mondays maybe that have been languishing, when if we tuned in sooner about how maybe we need a little more of that joie de vivre or spice things up a little bit, or like, I think I need a little more spontaneity. What about if we tuned into that sooner? Because again, that's just the difference between a life that is feeling super, super well lived and a life that feels like, oh, maybe I left some of it on the table. And like, none of it's ever going to be perfect. I'm not trying to, imply that like every day is being assessed and every month we're getting a grade. Although I do know people that do that, but just paying attention so that we don't let seasons of our lives go by where maybe we're asleep at the switch.
Yeah, it's that slipping into unconscious living, right? And the whole, really being aware happens in every moment, and you need to remember it over and over and over and over and over again for eternity, right? Or else you find yourself 3 months later going, what have I been doing for the last 3 months?
Right.
Yeah, it's like you wake up all of a sudden, and then you need to remember to keep waking up, because if you don't keep waking up, then you just stay asleep.
It's such a good point. And that's why it amazes me. It amuses me and horrifies me in equal measure about how we are as people. That like, why not? We're smart. Why don't we just learn it and then stick with it? Like for me, I count, Mondays down 1,814. Like I need to keep doing that mortality math in order to keep being the poke in the ribs that I need in order to go, what are you waiting for, you little chicken shit, about something that I'm putting off? Or what do you think you're just going to do that in retirement? Like, well, that's an elusive place in space. And so this thing that we just need the reminding, it is not enough to like maybe be listening to us talk right now and be like, yeah, life's short. I'm going to register for the course, or I'm going to do the thing. And it's like, yes. And, whether it's the hedonic adaptation you were alluding to, or whether it is just this idea that we get back into just our easy patterned ways. Let's just let us keep reminding ourselves, the Reaper, he's out there.
Yeah. 100%. I think the one other thing that I definitely want to make sure we touch on, I know we still have some time, and I'm loving this conversation, so I'm not landing the plane yet. But you kind of alluded to what I take as your perspective on widening our lives with the hey, turn the car around, go check that thing out, take a different route home, etc., cook with a different spice, all that kind of stuff, which I love. Yeah. But you also talk about deepening lives, and the widening is more of a adding vitality, spontaneity, and the deepening is more around meaning. I'd love to hear how you think about that these days in terms of, you've got all the techniques for vitality and widening, but what are some of the strategies that you take with clients around deepening?
Yeah. Thank you, by the way, for capturing the widening with vitality and deepening with meaning. That's the framework that I think we can all use to diagnose ourselves at any given moment. Like, am I feeling like there's enough width? Am I feeling like there's enough depth? And if we're not, then we can just do one thing on either part of the spectrum. The meaning one, you're right. That is just a heavy hitter, more about having that sense of purpose, again, which I do think we put too much pressure on ourselves, that our purpose at work needs to be magnanimous and impressive sounding to other people, when, oh my goodness, it could just be something sweet and, being a really great cat mother. Sometimes that's my purpose for the day. It can be back to having like meaningful connections with other people. Maybe it's tuning into spirituality. if that matters to you, or it could be about using your character strengths. It's not like the doing good in the world. And so there are so many ways we can get at that feeling that our life has depth. Truth be told, in my research, more people are suffering from a lack of vitality than a lack of meaning, but we know that it's rampant, right? The whole topic about finding meaning at work and meaning in our lives is massive. And like what you said you do in your initial kind of biopsy of people's lives is like the connection about finding, like, is there a reason you wake up in some way? Is there a purpose that makes you feel connected? We know the science is so clear about even how it ties to longevity and, you know, well-being, et cetera. So all this is to come back around to say, you know, the embracing of the tough stuff in life is one of the best portals. So anytime there is grief, anytime there is that struggle, again, the non-optional struggle or suffering that we put ourselves through because we've just decided that my outcome of how I want summer to be is I'm just stubborn and I want to stick to it. That's not struggle and suffering. You're doing that to yourself, honey. But back to the true struggle of an illness or of a relationship situation or of war or of the problems of life, that there will be no shortage. Those are the things that refine themselves over time, typically into creating meaning. Mm-hmm. And it's not me just yearning to put a really pretty bow on a bad thing. But I do think that it's worth pointing out that even, you know, according to research, you know, people who go through any kind of traumatic experience, the opposite of post-traumatic growth syndrome, of course, would be post-traumatic growth or post-traumatic PTSD would be post-traumatic growth. So anywhere between like 35 and 60% of people that have a trauma will actually emerge to a greater level of functioning. And so I think that recognizing that not if, but when the tough stuff comes our way, that it's all fodder for maybe a better perspective on life, that when we make it through and we, you know, if we're forged through fire and we're resilient and we make it through and we go, wow, that was really tough. It highlights in juxtaposition the better days. It helps us to show what the good life is because we can compare it to last month, which was not. And it's all just really poignant, really important ways and stuff to build a life of consequence. I don't know of many lives of consequence that haven't had some kind of challenge to overcome. And I think that that's, again, one of the parts of the recipe of this life worth living before we go.
I love that. That's, you know, there's there's a giant parallel in my mind of Western societies kind of putting mortality over here in the corner. We don't want to look at that. We're gonna get our dead in the ground as soon as possible and kind of like shut the door on that. And everything's sort of done in the background. And there's you know, bodies are prepared out of sight and all of that sort of you know, compartmentalizing. There's also the life shouldn't have to have loss of loved ones and shouldn't have to have relationship trauma and personal trauma and physical trauma and sexual trauma and all of the horrible things that happen are horrible and shouldn't happen. And, you know, is there a possibility that all of those things are as important and as much interwoven into our human experience that it doesn't mean that they're not going to hurt when they're happening? But right. The hurt is hard. The hurt you can't have the joy without the hurt. It's it is this you know, how do you take these moments and extract the joy and the insight and the life satisfaction from even sadness and grief and shame and guilt and fear and anger and all of the, you know, so-called negative emotions. And I think it's a life's work. I think that's, or maybe many lives' work.
Many lives' work. That's really beautifully put. You've reminded me in saying this, it sort of encapsulates for me one of the takeaways, I guess, of some of that post-traumatic growth is an appreciation for life. It's one of kind of the four main benefits. And it's kind of like the moral of our story here. It's like, any circumstance that can help us when we make our way through it, and, you know, by and large, we forge our way. That, like, wow, you know, having gratitude on the other side is that thing that helps make this precious existence feel like it is the special thing that it is. Now it's in the absence, for example, of that problem, or it's now in the containment of this disease or the eradication of that relationship, whatever it is, it's all fodder for just like, man, I get to be here. And maybe I don't have as many limbs, or maybe, I have scars and wounds that are of the emotional sort, et cetera, but I get to be here. And now what?
I love that.
Tell me, all right, we're going to land the plane. What are you going to do to F it up today?
This is such a good question in the moment. Okay. I'm rolling with you. I have errands for the rest of the day on some things, picking some stuff up for some travel and things. And I am going to go, I'm thinking where I'm going. I'm going to go to a back area where there's this arts place, apparently, in Palm Springs. I've been here for 2 years. And there's apparently this arts walk behind a plaza in an inexplicable location. I'm going to go sniff it out just because of you.
I love that.
What are you going to do after the day?
I'm gonna answer you, but I have the last time I was in Palm Springs, a friend of mine who loves finding all of the sort of hidden kind of speakeasy style things in whatever city that he's in, found a really great speakeasy in like an unlabeled door.
I know what you're going to call it.
You know which one I'm talking about. You don't have to say it. I don't want to give it away. Don't tell the listeners, but I just want to know you know about it.
Oh, it is not my biggest joy. On our walk today, the husband and I were talking about how every summer we do the list of all things summer, which is like little things you want to do. And again, it is not the big stuff. It's actually like the little tiny little bits and pieces. Like I want to go and I want to have, this kind of popsicle while we're walking, or just something like fun. And this bar is one where you have to go early or you don't get in. And I said, I want to go to PB by the time they close for their summer break. I'm loving this. Yep.
I love it. Fantastic. All right. I'll answer you. I wasn't deflecting. I promise. I am, my cousin just drove up. I can see his car outside, and I am going to, give him a big hug. I haven't seen him in about 6 months. And then he doesn't know this, and I didn't know this until right now. We're going to go it's only going to be 85 degrees out today. It was supposed to be about 96. So he's going to come in, we'll get some water, and then we're just going to go find a new hike somewhere in the area and just go check it out. I don't even know where it is yet. We'll go figure it out.
Oh, life is getting lived over there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we're getting after it. Effing it up today, Jodi.
I'm so excited. So excited. Good for you. Go hike it out.
How before I let you go, 4,000 Mondays we talked about. If people want to learn more about you or reach out for workshops or just get to know more Jodi, need more Jodi in their lives, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Well, I appreciate you even asking about that, and I'm pretty much sitting over at 4000mondays.com. So all the stuff's there's a calculator to calculate your Mondays left if you don't want to do math with your remaining time, and all the stuff's there.
Amazing. And this was a real joy for me. Thank you so much for spending time chatting and connecting today.
Same with you, Mike. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.